the Fullest podcast, someone who I've admired for his books I have, just really think is so with everyone. So I'm really excited. Brogan on the podcast. He is a holistic psychiatrist, New York Times best-selling book, Own Yourself, Time for Rain, and book, Integrative Therapy. She's the founder of the program Vital Mind Community, Vital Life. Completed her psychiatric training at Medical Center, Al University Medical College from MIT, and she is specialized solution approach to psyche symptoms. She is a Kundalini yoga teacher and a... Hi, Kelly.
Great to be here.
I'm really excited. Any questions forever, but I think I just love history and background about it. You have portfolios and you've been, but you have this and you're not afraid to shift. And I really deeply do that. Not very many people. I just want to know work. Did do it like really trust and then realizing it wasn't come to be?
I have to take assertion that to express myself because of us who manifested the and the opportunity to because we can't not feels safer for than to not, and not everybody is their defenses didn't line up that way. The courage that I experienced in my mothering is in my it's in taking the aspects of myself that I'm suffering in my own life, feel like a courageous share what I have to say, cares to listen, and that because there is a loneliness of having a that is suits. So funny thing how that works. I absolutely am the wool of the allopathic church. It's so interesting about is that, when often you're a wool setting, right? And effort to innovation to sort of like take control. But that is very is the dominant. And actually my mentor said that to me years ago. He said Western medicine is, and I was like, what do you know that are, being engaged by so many people? He insisted that, powerful scientism is of our time. And we're like the, Lama, insisting that his religious beliefs veal to cure problems because and there's so many instances where churches bow to the Western medical dogma, are implying it's actually everything. Other cog in the wheel. When I was at MIT, I became that we could crack the human suffering through treatment. And it was kind of a path by a suicide called Nightline. Or it was, I think it's probably still relevant at the time, service, phone hotline. And we were at this lovely old man, all of these calls that I would get and how it was that we could help. I went to medical school, ease ultimate with human. That's really what we have zero capacity to truly to someone else's process. Generally involves challenge, adversity, and fear and pain. Such a tremendous relationship to death. Infrastructure is built around effort to avoid an experience of advantages or seeming. I'll have trouble the suffering of others, and our journey is very meaningful for that. I can never possibly understand, really not that person. And it's very alluring to imagine of memorizing and I could feel okay.
Yeah.
Why I went into specialized in men who I vulnerable population, specialized in medicating them.
So yeah, I've interviewed people who did documentary on postpartum woman you may have heard of who postpartum psychosis to kill, and it was opening perspective on support, but then there's a treatment you can, they're good, and it's like because really what they need are during the process, not just apparently solve their problem.
Well, it's probably actually the incident. In fact, incident of infanticide that wasn't to a medication prescribed. It's very well documented from and violence that is patients. Is patient itself. So that's what we see is that whatever report to resolve, they actually often recidivistically, often not be easily resolved. What you're saying is we don't acknowledge the context narrative a patient is living. To say, well, you have often quote Krishnamurti to say that it's not to a profoundly sick. We are raising children. Most women raise on their own with no of being passed down to them. Have a couple of weeks off of work together and hire a nanny, and probably that's not even going to work because they're poor. And maybe there's a mom go to down the street, and I've often said, never in human ever been alone with an infant. In the case, it would be cause alarm for that one. Marshal her resources to an emergency because, right, what has happened is she just abandoned. So to expect that, let alone, goes on when you trash your body, adapt to the complex inner apothecary issues, right? And you've never actually been using toxic products and all that. Just the psychological, emotional aspects of been, it would be straight sail through that,
Mm-hmm. Wow. And I completely, and so I grew up and the way my culture, so that kind of led me down the Ayurvedic perspective, Chinese, and so, and so for someone like you in that, and especially postpartum women and whole picture, I mean, is that you, how did that happen? Medicating, this is one size medicine.
So I had a moment, right? These are inner reality, not necessarily jiving with reality, where the inside of us is right. And right when that happens. And, pretty reflexive it again, right? To sort of familiar awareness of what might be, right? So I had one of those moments, writing a prescription I was pregnant at my specialization, my fellowship during that, most of that year. And I remember that I would never medications. I don't 80,000 cases at the time in registry form, relatively, these who had been exposed to essence and were supporting to dangerous unmedicated as if there's nothing else. Yeah. Take a med or just send. I just thought I would never, even by somebody as good, right? So I ignored that because it was also very inconvenient. Kind of like, I don't know, surfaced again. I was diagnosed with arthritis at an integrative health. And I thought, I don't want to take a medication. It's just a hormone. I don't care what it is. I'm not doing that. There's such. And so I sought out a naturopath. I wanted to see what she was with. And she recommended that I go gluten and dairy, did a bunch of supplements, all that I did at that time. On paper, in the way that my brain, Hashimoto, in the space of a big natural hormone for a while, and I've never taken it since. And since that, this was land that exploded something inside me. For whatever reason, I was very rageful that I put this into remission. I never could be put into remission of training and stressful training. It's probably because of that, angry and just like hit the books. Months, just as somewhat obsessive, everything I could get my hands on, contrary to what I had been started with, to all of the differentness. I learned about a field, which had been in that term for, and I began, through that lens as responsive to the environment. Why would we engage pharmaceutical, reconsider, learning about as doctors, how beneficial are they? Some of the reasons we're given the impression more promising than the published scientific literature. So that time called Anatomy of an as, synchronous, a colleague gave to me, and she said, you have these meds and it's pretty contagious. And, it's by investigative journalist. He talks about 16 that are non-industry, the assertion that is dry, what is referred to in Genesis. So doctor-induced driving chronic. So he went out to investigate in science. The natural course of these so-called is far more benign than the introduced medications. And that about so-called schizophrenia, obsession, anxiety, literally. And to my mind, demonstrated that the benefit risks are legion. To that book, and I never started my entire career. I started to learn what it looked like to come off these meds. Every single patient, the opportunity to, no one's ever trained.
Yeah.
To learn that kind of trial by fire. Also began to learn about what suicidality actually look like. Intervene with, whatever. What is it? The architecture of that experience, morbid hopelessness, emotions. Do they just get when somebody kills themselves? That's important to learn about. The mystics have been for millennia well acquainted with the dark night of the sun. And then through my own life or my credentials, it was a very intensive where I began to, I cannot doctor these patients into have to do it. And also the doctor-patient model, increasingly problematic in our current time, collective consciousness, that it's practice self-ownership and outsource that agency or power authority figure. Myself, when a couple of years ago, really group-based online, but group-based.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the episode. Our sponsor, Beekeepers Naturals, known about them for a little while, Carly Stein and I absolutely love her and her journey. I think you guys, basically that's when I saw those products. And at the time, pregnant with, so I couldn't give it to him. He's a little too young. Kids can't, they're a little older. So love them because they use an ingredient called propolis. I already heard about it, but it's becoming of holistic healing. Bee medicine that bees use to also contains over 3 that are beneficial to the human. So after learning all of and the power of propolis, Bee Immune Propolis Throat Kit, I keep one back in my car and I have one. And that's because I is 2 years old. Him the kids version, so takes the regular version if I don't have the kids one around. And it's amazing. You are feeling like a sore throat, it works and spray it throughout the day as it feels like your throat, but in the best medication would, and feeling it as well. Not just of having a sore throat, but and it tastes really no complaints there. Really excited to share that is offering the free 2-week supply propolis throat spray. Do is pay $5 for amazing promotion. You must visit beekssnals.com. Know that. So EEKSNALS and naturals are plural /fullest of it. To us, this is an immune health, but if love it, Beekeepers Natural dollars, no question, insane. So go on the website right now. Also find Beekeepers Naturals in stores like Target. Hold on our podcast episode about that podcast episode. Thanks so much. Well, gosh, I want to kind of get to all of it. You were going through a hard, like, what do you, curious. I've never personally experienced that. And I'm curious, I view it answer. I don't want to say the word normal experience in life and support those people have agency and like your own, let's talk about just, right. I mean, the naturopath who helped you and all sorts of things, but then looking at you now and how much you share and the throwback and like, that's obviously so. And that's how I view it as well. Through a hard time, people support them and to look within yourself to allow them to have the best. I'm just curious, like who's seen so many patients, like population, or is like have like these thoughts in a way. Is normal to have suicidal thoughts.
Mm-hmm. I think that the dark night of the soul, an initiation process, individual mind to experience. Characteristic of that people. Characteristic of the illusory self. Don't have guide, wiser, elder to reflect to you. You is not the one that wants and ultimately feels worthy of. Then you might fuse with that. You are the one who wants to press the reset. I do think that the feeling of threshold, a feel not, transmit it takes. All of that is a lie, right? So always, of course, childbirth, right? Who are at their cervix going to say, or going to ask for an epidural, or want to rational and illogical to anyone, right? Yeah. But that's only in engagement reality that is before us. To move beyond what we do, we discover that we are powerful than our safe little familiar reality. In indigenous, the initiation that are collectively held are for, right? So the thinking is that in the individuation process, and you begin to understand what your soon to be adult individual, we live in an culture where we are childhood through college, we are not treated. My 12-year-old, a business, has a job, is writing a movie, and poet. Okay, she's not I told you this. She's not a special kind of. I have treated her for a number of years now. Though friends, I don't hold her to some sort of census. 12-year-old is capable of sitting in school for 8 hours a day. Need to, right? So point in the going to have to understand of what I think. I don't know what that's going to look like. Self-soothe, and if I can, as she of what, and I began, and vice versa, make it through with a loving. But if I get a power struggle, off rest. Right? Because I am loved for who needs me to be. Yeah. We are narcissistic extension, and our parents only shaped how they wanted us to be. Is even go to full matrix or something. My biggest nightmare. How her my love, conditional, open heart all the time. Right. Yeah. Super hard. Because if I don't, then patients and myself process. Typically, it's around 9, early 40s, and there's probably some Jungian explicitly, but happens then. You have a persona nearly adhered, the irony, right? And adhered to your face. It's got to come off. It has to. And so when you wounds everywhere, and so that probably when you throw the mix and all of the, emotion, lack of coping skills and the emotional terrain. And you throw in the biofeedback off of a habit forming, these folks are very who choose to walk this path, and many hundreds of them, personally experience interest coming off of psychiatric medication or psychic terrain. To see, okay, this is just universal. This is actually when you understand your fear of death, you're with your expectations, appeasing them, you're to wait outside of your afraid, right? No matter experiencing it and for what reason. I started with somebody, and that I was, and I had anyone built all around the Titanic. Well, it was all figured out. That was just the iceberg, right? It turns up the spiral. I mean, it's still in the fetal position. My cat being like, I can be my child self easily, so it's a spiral like process of expanding, contracting. Windows were when I was with the kinds I had buried and tried I would never feel. Hence as those initials, I would say.
How you ended up falling in. So it's Sayer.
Yes.
That story. How did you?
So the activist, so we so-called activists said at the beginning, is it because especially brave people inclined to help? Perhaps. But the why is that we experience trauma, we experience, or that led us to authority, the perceived authority, and actually doesn't have our, and we live in if we don't control, it's danger. Trying to describe like its opinion, like it's a compulsion, safety. And some of us, who are in spiritual awakening, if I feel about the dangers, which is actually how say in the world, then right? How would I explore if I shut up? What does that feel like? Or my family, and does that feel like? Or what prioritize myself nutrition and what does that feel like, right? So disrupt the reflex where and how we really inside and versions of myself. Cats, because I used to hate them. I thought they were gross, greasy and creepy, and they're just wouldn't want one of these. As they're like deities in my house. So I'm not afraid to be wrong, to completely seen myself, much experience, many different, to know that they can. I mean, I am somebody who red meat inclusive diet decade. And I have seen vegans by the hundred in practice, and I have seen when they introduce their diet. Mm-hmm. I am of veganism at this point. Experience journey that I had to go on. I, was an ethical drinking Pepsi before I got pregnant until my Hashimoto's, that I started pastured red meat, experience into remission. Then had that mentor who advocated for 12 and said, okay, well, you in your practice, that's why it works for them. Because they're likely to experience things like depression or multiple chemical sensitivity, they need red meat, but they'll never be well with. On the opposite side of the spectrum, that diabetics and those with heart disease, and they, and they do well on a vegetarian. This makes sense. And I don't even experience that, to kind of like trend deeper, more nuanced, understand the perspectives that I points. But the relationship, sometimes like, I don't know, new relationship, and I learned, we have so much in fact, like a 600 or something page love letters to each other over the, I sliced different paragraphs of it, of our wedding vows, and I read it is because you can't tell, like our voices are, and prosody is, couldn't even tell. And so like you get to be with somebody who's so much, right? But dynamics are such defensive structure, either perfectly complementary, however you want to look at it, horns. And it can be about, we have had long arguments about like probiotic, about HIV, cosmology. It is that I can feeling so open, feeling like I want to kill him. 2 sentences. My inner disturbance can only be lens of child psychology. And so I call at our rally, thank you, Bonnie, talk about this, just remember love in times when, and he has taught me that, deeply I adore me, that I can access him. I do love him, right? So victimized by that I'm right. Tendency to withdraw. I, like a lot of women, have age and want to process a lot of, sort of energetic, masculine, energetic defenses, a lot to learn from each other. And it's been like a real ground, like a real, like a for me to, and I'm still doing it, has been trending.
Yeah. a relationship, like a true relationship. And it's to be able to talk about it. And I'm so cute. Is your oldest 12?
Yes, I'm a mother too. And our daughters are actually the same ages, and yeah, I have a 9-year-old.
To Florida from is it for medical freedom? Like enjoy, being there.
Actually, because I don't harmony for one individual. Like I do believe that achieve harmony increasingly brings the mandala of, greater. For my own survival, because it's brought out. Unlike my patients, right, like very, very deeply buried shame or grief or pain, I am so adapted that my defense, right? So when I get angry, articulate, and I can slice and
wow
is, unconsciously developed over. I felt safer in the world, the feelings, right? And the only way reactive element, an urgency, right? So like if I get an email, I feel rejected, I will have dinner before I send my response. It's urgent. And 2 minutes, something that are an hour and a half to write. So it's actually made my shadow challenging because I know what I have going on, but it suffering and it pollutes and chips. Right. Mm-hmm. So I knew I had to leave New York, all of that energy, all that masculine. And then I also had gotten to conceive of not your life, and it was at that time that the doctor-patient thing program, my practice started to veer in a where I had these patients I couldn't shake. And then and I couldn't keep, like, we were so the outcomes. And so for that reason, I love this. I am Irish and Italian, so I don't know what genealogy, but my body feels this climate. My parents follow this girl and her. Yeah, this kind of took shape, and now one of the best nation, worked out that way.
Yeah, it wasn't planned to be that way. So I want to get into, I'd been following your work, your books. I mean, I have your toddler, so I was like, because there's so many, I'm just like, this is what they're teaching our children. It's such a Curious George book. So I was like, this is horrifying. So anyways, it's another book to refer to, who I love and trust. But when COVID happened about it and speaking up about things before, but then you're like, oh my God, personally affecting me yoga class anymore. When that happened, to see from the get-go, just being like, it's like what that we talked about earlier, your relationship and you and Sayer because people were, to your stuff, it was because here we are, all the fear-based, we need people to tell us, not something to be afraid of. Curious, like how it's out for you and how and your children.
Yeah. So hopefully overly invest the anonymous. You can vital force energy from of projections, right? Going to save this somewhere out there in the world, helping them see the light. In the beginning, I saw away, and that's why against my team's advice was saying that this pathological, let alone pathogen, actually garnered special attention, and things a year later would, for the most part, has made a decision about it. That I would in my observations turn towards continuing ultimately to Miami experience of mothering, foreground my experience of and a big part of that was taking daily dance. Point I said, okay, I'm just going to focus on what's actually happening in front of me until my gym went full demand dance class. That then was like, okay, right. And of course, see these experiences, what happened there is happening the world over. I left that studio with the manager, but I left that studio now, who and is of totally like manifested with totally experience.
Yeah.
And similarly, are that coherent and so anthroposophy and Steinerian that they are probably two mandates, then even it's totally different. And so we pulled them out of there at the same time, who is an international advocate.
Okay.
Yeah. It happened to move to Miami. And I was essentially the end of my ethos. And in all of these arenas that we to expect, we need authority structures. People think that anarchy, that's part of the conditioning as well, comes into all these educational medical, if you want to, I became a real advocate for some caveats because I still believe, and I don't win this, but I do still, it's my role as a mother. And I am from media, from, fake, and not completely in terms of radical unschooling. Appreciate, that when I pursue their amazing things happen. I'm the eldest, that anybody can find a job. It's amazing to me. I mean, this beautiful
unschooling or happening with the Waldorf?
It was kind of happening, but warehoused with strangers following, curriculum. There's only 24 hours in it to actually have to pursue, actually might be interested in. So she's interested in, and she's interested in general poetry, movies, and to flesh dry stuff. She's got to have, and so she also has chosen public school, the Florida virtual school, that I would never add for her to spend her time in a pile of lies. I'm not an advocate for that. Letting her, make these decisions. I'm free to express myself. We've actually every night, one of us, that we're interested in, included, and we just kind of rotated. A lot of stuff that I them and I would never have really thought of. We're all sitting down to do this, all how to make flower remedies or about them, whatever. It's been, I think I'm along with who are doing the work and the purpose and meaning in what's happening, the evil in our midst, that we have somnolence in our own sleep. Our process of awakening may require some of, our feelings of enslaved oppression, but also this opportunity to experience through freedom and liberation, not from the authority. Right? That's a different kind of, liberty. That when you're a prisoner and that's called a liberty, is inborn. And the reclamation of that, the engagement offered by an oppressive energy.
Yeah. Something you said in there, I have interviewed Zach Bush, and he said at one point, wanted this, we want everything. So we food systems like this because we chose to sit on the couch and Netflix and everything for us. And so and that's the beauty, in my opinion, now, because I know so many really woken up and realized dreams. They wanted to do plant the garden. They wanted to see. And then, even the thing, it's something, but it's just not that the Waldorf schools, to help our kids a certain, like you said, it's still just sitting and learn your philosophy is, which is, sovereignty and really, and I back to strengthen and our trust in ourselves and us becoming like Steiner, because work is just so incredible. And like you said, it's just so that I live in Orange County, incredible. But again, people say that they're going backwards now. Yeah, I think the unschooling movement short on time, but I just want the vital mind reset. Their opportunity to find people with, and so it's really
so to recognize that coming out of the online program, same materials, same everything, practice were better. Be the doctor-patient thing, right? Yeah. And crazy long wait list at the time. It kind of worked for us to be able to at literally a fraction, because I've always valued my experience and expertise. So, it was more accessible, though I am a big in the program, a number of friends and acquaintances. I have never had a single loan, an amazing believer in the to money. It's interesting because in my country is very prevalent. My experience was that they kind of just
yeah,
and there's a lot to that, because when we experience our relationship to money as a limiting fact, control over that we are unowned. I don't know. It's controversial. A lot people love. It's a lot. Notice people love to, but I stand by it. So we offer price since we started it. So. And investment for a lot of people, right? Well, prioritization, and they have to actually do it. It's investment, and they turn their attention towards it. That unique of it that involved the only one who has ever 27 years.
Wow.
His particular way of that is exclusively in their value, very much his. The ritual self-attention, because there's nowhere you can do this program kind of an on this. It has to be become the focus of your, even neurobiologically, something state. So there are many ways to a month-long wellness, and probably have a similar, but here you get to, with your self-care foregrounded. The first 2 weeks of the program are just because how unique this kind of alone. I never realized that I am only MDs on the planet offering in a public forum who actually, unequivocally, truly believe make mistakes. No role for things. All that germ theory does is victimhood and fear, and belief in demonized, invisible, different from the terror we all succumbed to after 9/11. That there's no role for any of this. One of my colleagues, and of course, medicine trained in that whole institution for years by lenses.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow. So the only program on the internet, somebody who actually believes to heal. And when you know what's possible, that healing lupus is possible. Recidivistic schizophrenia, suicidal, healing is possible. Put these testimonials out there. We publish a randomized trial. Inner be ignited, right? Happening. So like Joe Dispenza's tremendous field that, followers and help to generate. And now the capacity of its own. Yeah, kind of. But it's also, on a smaller scale, me too, because I know or for anyone. It has generated these, right? Which my friend Charles Eisenstein really ultimately a story that does not fit. It's called The Miracle, but it's into a new expanded reality and responsibility for our experiences. The only human pathology is how to and we have no idea what that even looks like, taking that responsibility now. All sorts of things, growing my own smartphone, and really every time I order from Amazon, very actively, like you said, there are going to be ways that and so, really, really about taking the wheel. Someone else is going to take it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I believe the same thing, makes mistakes. And I worry, work for me. She just told me weeks ago, she said, I was in Israel for dental and drove myself there, and she has a year-old son. And she said, I have lupus if I don't do anything right. Like, how can someone tell her? Right. And they don't know you're completely healthy, like yours hurts, but otherwise drop dead in 3 weeks. That is so
it's a cult thing. It is literally a spell, which are in the cancer realm, that unequivocally that after a diagnosis I think it was 16. And, there's actually because of it's an ex-mother-in-law, but my mother who, me, as she asks us and it's such a beauty because of contagion, of cancer. Oh, if you in a process based on biological adaptations that stress or danger or fear or so the screening, these cells appointment or whatever, not only get diagnosed is not a repeating from German New Medicine perspective. You initiate because of the shock of death, right? And that's why are the most common source of metastases because, and it's not just theirs, evidence this with it's confirming that every single these particular, but so not only actually, generated by the point. And, to understand it once everything kind of makes sense, right? Why we feel so scared of our living in this survival, right? Because we just line everything kind of safe, but we have to really obedient. And that's why I always encourage to never make decisions that you don't have a choice, right? So, I have 3 weeks to live. That's an illusion. Choose it. Decision because you don't have a choice. In my years in his career of treating terminal cancers that have ever been documented, largely nutrition-based, just like mine. And his field of belief that I think activated that and resolved the fear of former patient Allie's our connection. And she's highly recommend finding on Instagram while she's still there. And she says, did for her, we published all that I ever did for her, crazy. Literally it, it's like lifestyle stuff. Believed that at the time. And so I gave her permission to a different lens of meaning. She had her own gifts and duties through a different lens.
Wow. Yeah. Enforcement to believe that. And it's so to hear it from someone like you don't necessarily, but it's not, you need to believe that with that support system. So I just love your work. I guess your time, but I love, hopefully I can love Florida, and I need to find my people in Florida, spending more time in California. So
we have our friends who run ecstatic dance twice a month, 5 people, and every single one. There's friends all over the place. There are so many people here. They aren't even necessarily, don't tread on me vibes. They're going to keep living there.
Totally, yeah.
And so to be, and I don't know how long it's there, and it's probably hold it down.
Definitely tossing it away. Do I stay? What do I do here? Constantly something but talking to people like information. It's and like you said, and that's and so. Thank, love you, and
thank you. My pleasure.